Hello, history fans. Welcome to our last module. We made it. Module number 8, the Civil War and Reconstruction. Since our last lecture video was so long and complicated, it was like an overload of information. I really worked to try to keep this one short, sweet, to the point. So we only have two main themes or two big ideas that we're going to be talking about today. First thing, Reconstruction, and second thing, the end of Reconstruction. Simple, no troubles. So let's get to it. The important thing about the Reconstruction, the important thing to realize is, like, now that the Civil War is over, what do we do? Now that the Civil War is over and these two countries have to join to each other again, how does that work? How do we reconstruct the country? Now, different people have different answers to that question. How do we reconstruct the country? Reconstruction means different things to different people. So if you're looking for a big idea or a thesis of today's lecture, that would be it. Reconstruction means different things to different people. Different groups want different things out of Reconstruction. So the first group we're going to talk about are politicians. Politicians try to reconstruct the country. That's their goal. There were two countries for a while. Now we have to join back together and create one country again. They do this through politics. In 1866 midterm elections, the Republicans win 75% of the House seats. Mostly because Southerners can't vote yet because they're not in the country yet. Republicans are the only ones who are left. So these Republicans, this Republican-controlled Congress goes to work in a major way. And we can see those bullet points here, 1865, 68, and 70. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution. Think of these three amendments to the Constitution as a group, as a unit. They go together. Together, they are called the Civil War Amendments. For an obvious reason, they're right after the Civil War, right? The 13th Amendment abolishes slavery. Very important thing to do right after the Civil War. The 13th Amendment abolishes slavery. The 14th Amendment makes all of those freedmen citizens. Think back to our last lecture about Dred Scott decision in the Supreme Court, how they said that no slave or descendant of a slave, every African American in the country would never be a citizen. That's overturned by this. 14th Amendment makes those freedmen citizens. Now that they have citizenship, they need the right to vote. The 15th Amendment gives freedmen the right to vote. So the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments frees the slaves, abolishes slavery. 14th Amendment makes them citizens. 15th Amendment gives them the right to vote. Very important new set of laws, new set of statutes that come out of that Republican-controlled Congress. Another important piece of legislation, 1875 Civil Rights Act, or the Enforcement Act. Enforcement Act meaning enforcing the 15th Amendment, particularly the 15th Amendment, trying to ensure that the freedmen get that right to vote in reality. Don't just have that right on paper, but actually get to walk into a ballot box, mark their vote, and have it count. Very important piece of legislation, but it doesn't last very long. In 1883, it's declared unconstitutional, and it is a serious setback for African Americans because it is the last piece of civil rights legislation until the 1960s. A long time. So another group of people, the Freedmen's Bureau, they have a separate goal for Reconstruction. The Freedmen's Bureau is a federal program, I guess, if you will, a federal department working at the state level. So we just talked about politicians trying to reconstruct the country at the national level. Now we're thinking about the state level. The Freedmen's Bureau comprised mainly of white Northerners, but they're going into southern states and working at the state level to try to recreate a better South, to try to guarantee some of those liberties, our favorite word, try to guarantee some of those rights and liberties for the freedmen. The Freedmen's Bureau is a three-pronged program, and you can see it right there, 1, 2, 3. They have 3 goals. They want to establish schools and hospitals, provide for some basic welfare, increase their quality of life. They want to give aid to the poor and elderly. So the Freedmen's Bureau acknowledges that there are some freedmen who are going to need a little extra help getting their feet under them. They're very, very poor and the elderly who can't work. And third, and most importantly, guaranteeing freedmen equal treatment before the law. Equal treatment before the law. So what do we mean when we say that? That would be things like, think back to our 6th, 7th, 8th Amendment. Some of those pretty basic foundational rights and liberties that have to do with legal aspects. So right to a speedy trial, right to a fair trial, right to an impartial jury, right to law counsel, legal counsel, right to an attorney, being able to know the accusation against you. Some of those very basic legal rights that African American freedmen did not have for so long, trying to guarantee that they're given a fair shake in courts of law. Now, the Freedmen's Bureau makes very real strides forward. And we can see that in this picture here on the right. These 7 men are the first African American men elected to Congress. What does this tell us? This tells us that freedmen are voting, that they are electing people that they think will represent them. Why is this important? Why is it important to have black people in Congress? Right, yeah, like it's good because these men are your neighbors, they're your friends, they're your relatives, they know your life story, they know the hardships that you face, and they have potential solutions to those hardships. And they have the power potentially to do something about it, to fix these problems. So there is a way for African American community in the South to now have a voice in their government, something that was absolutely not happening under slavery. So it's important for the adults, important politically, but also think about it this way. Why might it be important for children to see African American senators or representatives? Right, it's an inspiration, it's a motivation. Now you have options. As an African American child growing up in the South, before the Civil War, you had no option. You were going to be a farm laborer. You were going to be a slave. You were going to be working in a mine. Manual labor, hard work, all day, dawn to dusk, no rights at all. But now you have options. Now you can become a preacher. You can become a teacher. You can become a politician. Something to shoot for. You have a future, in other words. So the Freedmen's Bureau does a lot of good things, but there are problems. It's chronically underfunded, chronically understaffed, so they don't make as many strides as they possibly could. And it's short-lived. It only lasts 5 years, 1865 to 70. It's supposed to be renewed at that point, but our good friend, President Johnson, lets it expire. It doesn't last. So now let's look at the local level. If we've looked at the national level, we looked at the state level. Now let's go to grassroots movements. What do the freedmen themselves want out of Reconstruction? They want to reconstruct the family. Remember our last module and our discussion about the primary documents, we were talking about Solomon Northrop, right? And we said that as terrible as slavery was maybe the worst thing about it was that it split up families. Something so basic as not knowing where your child is or where your husband is was taken away from these people. And so as soon as they gain their freedom, the freedmen, those former slaves, start trying to find each other. And so we have examples of that here in some newspaper ads. These are like want ads. Now here's a lot of examples. Well, let's just talk about this first one. I'm going to read because it's kind of small, so I'll read the top portion to you. We receive many letters asking for information about lost friends. All such letters will be published in this column. We make no charge for publishing these letters from subscribers to the Southwestern, the name of the paper. All others will please enclose 50 cents. Pastors will please read the requests published below from their pulpits. Now, why might that be important? Pastors will please read the requests published below from their pulpits. Right. Two things here, right? First thing, the majority of African American people are illiterate at this time because they weren't guaranteed the right to an education. They were never taught how to read. They can't read the Southwestern or any other paper, but by golly, they go to church. The second thing, another right and liberty that freedmen couldn't necessarily enjoy under slavery was the right to religion. And so as soon as they're free, they become a church-going people en masse. Everyone goes to church on Sunday. And so if you have a place full of African American people, guaranteed that you're going to have a large group there every week, if not more often, and your pastor reads you this letter, now all of a sudden you've got a massive social network. And so by word of mouth, a lot of people are able to find their lost relatives. So let's keep reading this newspaper ad. Someone wrote into this newspaper trying to find her family. It says, "Dear editor, I wish to inquire about my people. I left them in a trader's yard in Alexandria with a Mr. Franklin. They were to be sent to New Orleans. Their names were Jarvis, Moses, George, and Maria Gaines. Any information of them will be thankfully received. Address me in Aberdeen, Mississippi. Signed, Cecilia Rhodes." Okay, so why is this important? What kind of information does Mrs. Cecilia Rhodes offer to help people help her find her family? Okay, yeah, first, where did she leave them? A trader's yard. What is that? A slave auction. That was the last time she saw her children, was when they were being auctioned off. In Alexandria, with a Mr. Franklin, and they were going to New Orleans. So she knows at least the last name of the person who bought them. She knows where they were headed. She gives their names. So potentially there's a lot of good pieces of helpful information in that sentence, but let's think about this further. Alexandria and New Orleans. New Orleans, Louisiana. She's in Mississippi. There's a lot of way between them, a long way between them. They're separated by a large distance. That could be a problem. With a Mr. Franklin. Now, do you think that somebody with the last name Franklin is the only one who lives in New Orleans? No, I mean, New Orleans is a big city. The state of Louisiana probably has a lot of Mr. Franklins. She doesn't really have a whole lot to go on here. And so sometimes freedmen trying to find their families can be very difficult. But by all means, they're still going to try. So let's talk about the end of Reconstruction now. The corrupt bargain of 1877. It all has to do with the presidential election of 1876. So here we see our electoral map again. That presidential election of 1876 is close. Neither the Republican Hayes nor Democratic Tilden has enough electoral votes to win. It all comes down to these unresolved states: Florida, Louisiana, and South Carolina. What do those three states have in common? Right, they're all southern states. And so this leads Southern Democrats to offer a deal to the Republicans. The Southern Democrats said, hey, we'll give you these states electoral votes, which means we'll give you the presidency if the first thing you do as president is remove federal troops from the South. Now, Hayes and his cohort know that if they remove federal troops from the South, that the African American freedmen will be left on their own. They will be left defenseless. That all of those strides they made in Reconstruction will evaporate. They know that. But they do it anyway, because you only live once. And Hayes wants to be president. And this leads to Southerners trying to reconstruct the Old South, trying to return the South to a pre-war condition, make it to where the Civil War never even happened. They began with the disenfranchisement of blacks. All of the advances that they made evaporate. Blacks can't vote, which means they're not voting their own type of people in office. They have no legal rights anymore. They have no right to education, to religion, to freedom of movement, on and on and on. In our image analysis, we talked about the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan membership explodes. No one is going to stop anything they do. And this leads to the legalization of intimidation and violence. And so in the module coming up, you'll read about the Mississippi Black Code, and you'll watch a documentary called Slavery by Another Name, and this will lead right into that information. That picks up where we are leaving off today. So, I hope you have enjoyed this kind of depressing lecture about Reconstruction, and I hope you have good luck walking through the rest of the module. Bye.